The cold vacuum of space was a silent predator, watching and waiting, its hunger inexhaustible. The stars flickered like distant embers as the enormous alien armada surged toward the planet below. To the Xantor, the human homeworld, Earth, was nothing but an inconvenient obstacle, a little more than a pebble in the way of their much grander plans. The Xantor had conquered countless worlds, and Earth was next on their list. To them, it was simple. The humans would run. They always did, but they were wrong. In the dark, the shadows of Earth's greatest cities flickered to life. Below, humanity moved in chaos. Ships soared into the sky as alarms screamed through the streets, buildings emptied in a frantic rush, and people gathered in terrified groups, hoping for survival. On the flagship of the Xantor fleet, the High Commander Gortak watched Earth's response through the vast array of screens that filled the war room. He sneered. "Fools," he muttered, his alien tongue harsh and guttural. "They think they can escape, that they can run from the inevitable. But we will crush them in the end." His mind worked like clockwork. The strategy was set. The blockade would be complete within hours. Every human ship would be intercepted, every escape route cut off. The ground forces were already en route to Earth's largest cities, where the resistance would be crushed in mere minutes. But as Gortak prepared to issue the command, his communications officer, a creature named Ziltor, tapped his shoulder, voice trembling. "Commander, we have a discrepancy." Gortak turned, irritated. "What discrepancy?" Ziltor hesitated, eyes flicking to the massive holographic projection of Earth. "The human ships, they are not fleeing. They are engaging." Gortak's brow furrowed. "What?" The human fleet was barely a fraction of the Xantor's forces, but it wasn't running. Instead, humanity was uniting, fighting back with desperate ferocity. Ships, hastily cobbled together with salvaged technology and alien weaponry, streaked across space toward the Xantor armada. Earth's finest engineers and military strategists had already devised an unorthodox plan, knowing full well that they could never win a conventional battle. But it wasn't about winning, it was about sending a message. In the chaos of the orbital skirmishes, Captain Naomi Hayes of the USS Vanguard looked out from her command deck, her jaw set with a grim determination. The Xantor might have underestimated humanity's resilience, but they had made one crucial mistake. They had no idea who they were dealing with. "Deploy the drones," she ordered coldly, her voice steady even as explosions rocked the Vanguard. "All units, execute Phase 2. Her first officer, Lieutenant Ryan Kessler, stared at the screens in disbelief. "You want to unleash them now?" "Sir, we haven't even gotten all of the new tech online." "The drones are ready," Naomi replied. "They're the only shot we've got. If the Xantor want to fight, we'll give them one. But on our terms." With a flick of her wrist, the command was given. Out of the depths of space, beyond Earth's atmosphere, swarms of sleek, humanoid-shaped combat drones launched from hidden launch bays in Earth's scattered fleet. They were powered by alien tech, yes, but they were still unmistakably human in design. The Xantor were unfamiliar with these types of drones. The sudden onslaught was unlike anything they had seen before. Gortak roared in frustration, watching as thousands of drones sped toward his flagship in the fleet. His tactics had been flawless, until now. "Redirect all firepower to the drones," he barked. His crew scrambled to comply, but something was wrong. These drones were elusive, quick, their movements too coordinated. They didn't behave like machines. It was almost as if they were thinking. "They have an AI," Ziltor said in shock. "A sentient one. Yes, I know," Gortak snapped, his claws tightening on his chair. "But it's not just that. They're adapting. We've never encountered this level of..." Before he could finish, a new series of explosions rocked the Xantor fleet, sending shockwaves through the flagship. "We're under attack," Ziltor shouted. The High Commander's eyes widened as he saw what the drones were doing. Some were attaching themselves to the alien ships, injecting nanite swarms into their hulls, corroding metal and short-circuiting systems with alarming speed. Others were transmitting data back to Earth, hacking into the Xantor's advanced technologies faster than they could defend against it. "Impossible. We've encrypted everything. We have the best security protocols in the galaxy." "Clearly not." Naomi's voice came through the comms, calm but cutting. "And you've made a huge mistake, Gortak. Earth doesn't run. We fight." "Oh." On Earth's surface, the chaos continued. The Xantor had landed their first wave in several major cities, But instead of humans cowering in fear, they found an unexpected resistance. A force that should not have existed. Armed with improvised weapons, the ragtag human militia was launching guerrilla attacks from every possible corner. Some had taken alien tech and repurposed it, while others had developed weapons that were as deadly as they were unpredictable. The first wave of Xantor soldiers was decimated within hours. Gortak felt his heart rate spike as the data flowed back to him. His ships in orbit were being disabled, his ground forces wiped out, and even the elite shock troops he had deployed to Earth were caught in human traps and ambushes. "Call for reinforcements," he demanded. But his voice shook. "No time." "Commander," Ziltor said, panic rising in his voice. "The human drones, they've broken our fleet's main systems. We can't maintain a defense perimeter around Earth much longer." Gortak clenched his fists. "I will not lose to these vermin." He slammed his hand down on the communications panel, activating a direct transmission to Earth. His image filled the screen in front of Naomi Hayes. "Human," Gortak spat, "you are playing with fire. You will not survive this. Your planet will burn, and your people will be exterminated. Your pathetic resistance will amount to nothing." Naomi's eyes burned with a cold fire as she stood before the screen. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. "Is that so?" she said, a slight smile curling her lips. "Well, maybe you should have done a little more research before you attacked Earth." Gortak's rage grew. "You are nothing compared to the might of the Xantor. You cannot defeat us." Naomi's grin widened. "Funny you should say that," she said, "because you just activated our secret weapon." At that moment, the sky above Earth darkened as hundreds of massive human-made warships emerged from hidden locations. The flagship of the human fleet, the Vanguard, had been leading the charge. But now it was joined by an entire armada of ships, all bearing the same advanced technologies and ruthless tactics. The Xantor fleet was surrounded. Gortak stared at the screen in disbelief, his mind racing. How did you?" Naomi leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with cold fury. "Because we never run." As Gortak scrambled to respond, the true horror of the situation dawned on him. The humans weren't just fighting back. They had outsmarted them, and there was nothing left to do but face the consequences. But before he could make his next move, the human fleet's weapons powered up, and the screen went black. The silence on the flagship of the Xantor fleet was deafening. High Commander Gortak stood motionless, his mind in a state of shock. The enormity of the situation was just beginning to sink in. He had thought the humans would crumble, that they would scatter before the might of the Xantor Empire. Instead, they had become the apex predators in this fight, and now Gortak was realizing just how outmatched his forces truly were. "Activate full fleet-wide defense protocols," he shouted, but his voice was hollow, devoid of the confidence it once carried. There was no denying it. This was no longer a simple conquest. It was a losing battle. As the Xantor fleet scrambled to reorganize, the fleet of human ships moved with a terrifying precision. The Vanguard, along with its allies, had made a quantum leap in strategy and technology. The newly activated ships, all built with a mixture of alien tech and human ingenuity, radiated a cold brilliance in the void of space. "Commander," Ziltor said hesitantly, "we've lost contact with the ground forces. The humans, they've infiltrated our secure comms and locked us out of the planetary defense systems." A cold shiver ran down Gortak's spine. The humans had done what was once thought impossible. They had turned his own systems against him, and now they controlled the battlefield, not just in space, but on Earth itself. "We have to retreat," Gortak finally said, though his voice cracked. "There's no hope of victory here." Back on Earth, humanity's resistance surged with new vigor. The cities were burning. Yes, but they were burning with the flames of revolution. The Xantor were no longer the unstoppable force they once were. They were scrambling, retreating, overwhelmed by the ingenuity and relentless will of the humans. Every inch of the ground that the invaders had taken was now contested. The Vanguard had already disabled the majority of the Xantor ships in orbit, leaving only a handful of crippled vessels to try and regroup. Captain Naomi Hayes stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, staring at the screen in front of her. The fleet was in position. The humans had won, but there was still one final step to take. "Captain," Lieutenant Kessler spoke softly, "the remaining Xantor ships are attempting to disengage. Should we pursue?" Naomi paused. "We could destroy them, but we need to send a message. We need them to know that this war is over, and the Xantor will never again threaten Earth. Kessler nodded, understanding her intent. Shall we broadcast it now? Naomi's lips curled into a tight, grim smile. Yes, do it. The message was broadcast across the universe. Every Xantor ship within range, every corner of their empire, would hear it. Xantor, Naomi's voice rang through the void, cold and unyielding. You came to our world thinking we would run. You thought your power and your fleets were enough to crush us. But you were wrong. We did not run, and we will never run. Earth stands, and humanity stands with it. The war is over. You've lost. Gortak sat in his command chair, seething with rage. He had watched the message play on every screen, seen the human ships, and felt the weight of their triumph. The full scope of their victory was terrifying. They had not only driven the Xantor back, they had exposed a fatal flaw in the Empire's plans. They had underestimated humanity. We have failed, Gortak muttered, his voice barely audible. We thought we could crush them like every other species. But this one is different. Ziltor, standing beside him, dared not speak. The silence between them was suffocating. But Gortak's fury was quickly replaced by a realization. The Xantor Empire had already conquered countless worlds, and each time they had been met with resistance. They crushed it, just as they had planned to do with Earth. But humanity had done something none of their previous foes had done. They had learned, adapted, and fought back on a scale never before seen. And now, the consequences of underestimating them would stretch far beyond the edges of this single galaxy. We need to retreat, Ziltor whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. There's nothing more we can do. The humans have won. But Gortak's eyes gleamed with something darker now. He wasn't ready to admit defeat. Not yet. His mind raced, plotting, scheming. Not yet. This isn't over. On Earth, the celebrations were already beginning. The skies were full of humanity's ships, their flags waving in the stars. People gathered in the streets, cheering, embracing. The threat had passed. The Xantor were retreating, and for the first time in history, humanity had not only fought back an invader, they had wiped out a threat that spanned the stars. Naomi stood on the deck of the Vanguard, her eyes gazing out at the distant, burning wrecks of the alien fleet. We've won, Lieutenant Kessler said quietly, his voice filled with awe. No, Naomi replied, her voice distant. We've survived, but the real fight has just begun. Kessler turned to her, confused. What do you mean? Naomi looked up at him, her face grim. The Xantor may have lost this battle, but we've made an enemy of an empire that spans the stars. Their defeat here won't be forgotten, and they won't stay down forever. Her words hung heavy in the air. The fight against the Xantor was over for now, but Naomi understood what many others didn't. The Xantor had never been a species to let defeat dictate their actions. They would return, and when they did, humanity would have to be ready. But that was the future. For now, Earth could breathe. Humanity had shown the universe that they were no longer the helpless creatures they had once been, but a force to be reckoned with. No longer would they cower in fear when the stars themselves came to conquer them. Now, humanity stood tall, a proud and defiant species. As Naomi turned to leave the command deck, her communicator beeped. Captain, a voice crackled through. Incoming transmission. From the Xantor. Naomi's heart skipped a beat. Put it through, she said, her voice steady. The image of Gortak appeared on the screen, his eyes burning with fury in the unmistakable presence of someone who had lost, but was far from defeated. You may have won this time, human, Gortak's voice echoed, thick with malice. But remember this, the Xantor do not forget, and we do not forgive. Naomi's eyes narrowed. You'll be back. Oh, we will. And next time, we will finish this. You have awakened something you cannot control. The Xantor Empire will have its revenge. The screen went black. Naomi stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. She knew Gortak was right. The war was far from over. The Xantor would return, and humanity's greatest challenge had just begun. She turned toward the command deck, resolute. Prepare for the next stage. We won't be caught off guard again. As the first lights of the stars flickered out into the blackness of space, Naomi Hayes and humanity knew that the road ahead would be long. The universe would test them, but they had faced down one empire, and they had survived. And as far as the Xantor were concerned, the real question remained, would they ever be able to destroy a species that refused to be crushed?